Welcome to SEPSA Talk. I am Evan Sapia Kisi, the host of SEPSA Talk. And as usual, I'll be hosting with Mr. Edmond Yeboah. SEPSA is Center for Better Society Advocacy and Research Africa. SEPSA Africa is a non-profit organization that believes in a better society for all. We in SEPSA Africa believe that a better society begins with you and I. Hashtag, a better society begins with me. For more information, please log on to www.sepsaafrica.org. Please follow us on the various social media platforms: YouTube, SEPSA Talk, Facebook at SEPSA Africa, Instagram, SEPSA Africa, and Twitter at SEPSA Africa. Like always, today we bring you another interesting discussion on the topic: has the Planting for Food and Jobs policy improved food security in Ghana? For those of you who are aware, in 2017, the government of Ghana launched the Planting for Food and Jobs policy with 5 models. The first model aims to promote food security in Ghana while providing jobs. Despite strides made by this policy in the area of food security in the first 3 years of implementation, it's currently hindered by a number of challenges. And in this episode of SEPSA Talk, we examine the evolution of the Planting for Food and Jobs, as well as offering recommendations, all of which will help improve the food security situation in Ghana. And to help us deal with this important topic, my guest, which will be introduced by my co-host, are...
To help us deal with this very important topic is Dr. Kwabena Kra. He is a postdoctoral research fellow at the Center for Global Development. At the same time, he's an ST consultant at the World Bank. He has a PhD in agriculture and applied economics at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in the USA. He holds a master in agriculture and applied economics from Mississippi State University, also in the USA. And he has a Bachelor of Science in Agricultural Sciences from the University of Cape Coast, Ghana. Dr. Kra, welcome to SEPSA Talk.
Thank you for having me, Edmond and Ivan. It's great to be here.
Our second guest is our own Mr. Haruna Gado Yakubu. He's a research fellow at SEPSA, but he's also an animal nutritionist and a feed safety engineer. He also is a research assistant at the Near-Infrared Spectroscopy Laboratory at the Hungarian University of Agriculture and Life Sciences. He's currently doing his PhD in animal science at the Doctoral School of Animal Science at the Hungarian University of Agriculture and Life Sciences. He holds MSc in Agricultural Nutrition and Feed Safety Engineering at the same university, and he has a BSc in Agriculture from the University of Cape Coast. Welcome, Mr. Haruna Gado Yakubu.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you very much, Edmond, for doing this. And I must also say thank you on behalf of SEPSA team to Haruna and Dr. Kra for making time to discuss this important topic with us in the next 60 minutes. I must also say that we are streaming live on Facebook. And so those of you who are joining us on Facebook, please stay with us and keep your questions coming. We also have some audience here on Zoom, and there would be time for you also to come in. But nevertheless, you could always send in your questions and comments as we move along. So great. I would not waste any time. I would begin the show, and then later I'm sure Edmond would also come in with some follow-up questions and some major questions as well. And I would like to begin with you, Haruna Gado Yakubu. maybe just to twist what I intended to ask at the very beginning, what would you say, or let me put it this way, where do you think Ghana stands in terms of food security? I mean, where would you place Ghana, or how would you assess the food security situation in Ghana currently?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on the show. For almost 8 months now, I have not been on the show, and nice sharing it with Kobna. Well, Evans, when you look at food security generally, when we talk about food security, what are we looking at? So the Food and Agriculture Organization gives a clear explanation what food security should be. In essence, at all times, we should have physical and economic access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food, which meets the dietary needs and food preference of any citizen, or averagely, the active citizens of a country, to promote a healthy life. So we have 4 dimensions that we look at: availability, accessibility, affordability, stability, and utilization. Now, the focus is what is the current status of food security in the Ghanaian context. Evans, we have the Economics Intelligence Unit, who is mastered in the area of Global Food Security Index calculation. So for some years now, it has become acceptable to many policymakers that the Economics Intelligence Unit's classification is a good one. So for the purpose of today's show, I would like to look at their trend, where we are currently. So if you look at before the implementation of Planting for Food and Jobs in 2016, Ghana scored overall 52.2. That's in 2016 out of 100 score. The ranking usually is not important, it's the score that we consider. For the ranking, you can have 3, 4 countries ranking the same depending on the score. In 2017, we scored 53.2, but remember that 2017 figure is basically a reflection of the agricultural season, or the availability, accessibility, affordability, and stability of food from the over-year period, 2016 to 2017, what happened between that. So for 2017, what we have achieved, we cannot associate it to only Planting for Food and Jobs. Now, 2017, the Planting for Food and Jobs policy was launched. 2018, our value appreciated a little over 0.03. That's a 53.5 score. Then in 2019, amazingly, we dropped to a 51.2. And in 2020, we attained a 53 score again. So you look at the trend, we are doing a little above the 2016 figure. Nevertheless, we have improved somehow. So Evans, when you look at the overall score, they score us in terms of areas that we can consider ourselves having the strength. For instance, they look at the micronutrient availability in the country and they consider it as a strength in the Ghanaian context. The volatility of agriculture production, they score us as a strength. Sufficiency of supply, they also scored as a strength. Food safety net programs, they consider that too as a strength. What is the strength here? The strength is that we've scored an indicator for these factors above 75 score. We have 3 challenges that we have to look at according to the survey. That the food security and access policy commitments. So when you look at the food security and access policy commitments, they consider it as a challenge. Why is it a challenge? We don't have a long-term implementation plan. For instance, we used to have FASDEP, and subsequently I'll speak to that. FASDEP covered almost 12 years. Now governments come and then they change. We used to have the fertilizer subsidy policy. It was suspended somewhere in 2014, reintroduced in 2015, had issues, and then in 2018, it was enrolled into the Planting for Food and Jobs. So we seem not to have a policy commitment. Governments come and they do what they like, short period, trying to just touch on the issues. The food loss is a challenge. You have people having bumper harvest seasonally, then how to process or store this food for the next season becomes a problem. And then dietary diversity, they've seen that though we have micronutrient availability, but the dietary diversity in the country, there is somehow some differences. For instance, when you take the northern zone comprising now the Savannah, the northern region, the northeast region, and then OT and Volta, they've seen that there is a diversity of dietary need. So if you look at even the UNDP data, talking about our nutrient need as a people, you can always see that these areas that I mentioned, they are underprivileged when it comes to dietary supply. So basically, this is where we are. And overall, we scored a moderate performance over the years that I've mentioned. So that's the food security status as at now.
Thank you very much, Gado. I'm sure Edmond would.
I have a question, Gado. So the beautiful outlay or picture that you've given us, is it with respect to only the food that we produce, or it takes into account the food that we import?
Great. So the Global Food Security Index, when they are looking at that, they don't delineate the source, whether you import or that. They look at the time that they are doing the survey over the period, the availability, accessibility, and affordability. So you may have domestic supplies, which we can talk about subsequently when we consider the success of the Plenty for Food program. But for now, what I spoke about comprises the food, both import and domestic production.
Thank you very much.
Before we ask Kra also to come in, I just wanted to find out from you, Haruna, the 4 key dimensions of food security that you talked about. Is there any particular area that Ghana is lacking? I mean, because you talked about accessibility, availability, stability, and utilization. Would you say we are lacking in some areas, or this was not shown in the data?
It was shown, the scores were shown. So averagely, we scored above the required standard for us to achieve a moderate performance. But the affordability issue became a problem in 2020, and it was attributed to people losing jobs, like the price of food and commodities went up, and people losing jobs, they were not having the capital to afford this. So the affordability issue became a problem. And now in 2021, currently what we are witnessing as a shortage, I predict that the next score will have a problem with availability as well.
I'm sure the affordability, you mean accessibility, right?
Yes, so it must be affordable. It must be accessible before you can even afford it. So if it's not accessible, you cannot even afford.
Right. Kra, what do you also say to, I mean, Gado has already probably has said it all, but if there are any additions you would want to add to when it comes to the status of food security in Ghana?
Evans, thank you once again. It's really interesting that myself and Haruna, independently, we're actually looking at the same report. You see my notes, I was compiling all these things from EIU last night. And I like the way.
I saw you were smiling when Gado was speaking.
Yes. And I like it, it's good. So it means that when information is out there, people are actually going to fish for it and read and utilize it. So Haruna has already, given the breakdown, but, as an economist, we always want to put the country in perspective, right? We always want to compare to others, what others are actually doing. So if you go back to the scores again, the Global Food Security Index, which basically considers 113 countries, right? I think you started this from 2012, and every year they have it. But 2021, maybe because of COVID or something like, the report is not out yet. But up to 2020, I was looking at the trend. So in 2016, Ghana were ranked like 78th on the global, food security index in 2016. And I wanted to go back to 2016 because I wanted to see what we were doing before the implementation of this program, right? And then 2017, which is when the program actually was starting to kick in, even though that was when the president actually declared. And so we were ranked 76, okay? Then 2018, like when the program had already, kicked in and things were moving on, we were ranked 73rd. So it means there was, we did better. We moved 3 steps. And then in 2019, amazingly, we came to 59th, right? Still out of the 113 countries, which was really, really cool. But in 2020, we're back to 77th.
Yeah.
So if we are even attributing, what the food security situation in the country currently to the planting for food and jobs, well, you can say, well, over some time we're doing well, but then in 2020, we are back to implementation levels. But then again, COVID hits, and so we can always attribute it to the COVID-19 pandemic. But that means what that tells me is we are also not doing great relative to, in terms of the fight against COVID and things like that, relative to the other countries that were also hit, because every country was hit with this COVID-19 pandemic. So even if you're doing terrible on something, right, that you used to do good, it means you're actually not doing well in the presence of this COVID-19. Okay, so we were doing quite okay, right? Not the best. We're doing quite okay when we compare to some of the African countries that are on the list. And of course, I must say that it is not every African country that is on it, but you have, substantial number of them on it. Ghana is ranked third, next to South Africa, 2020, next to South Africa and Botswana. So in terms of, food security, we are not, we are not there yet, but we are doing, slightly okay. Areas that we are not doing, I think we are not doing quite good is, and Haruna actually talked about this, the Global Food Security Index is, an aggregation of a lot of stuff. You have the affordability, we have availability, we have quantity and safety, of food, and then natural resource and resilience, how quick you can actually come back when there is, shock. And if you look at the reports, that one, the natural resource and resilience, we're scoring like 42.3. So to me, that relative to all the other, the three other things like affordability, availability, quality, and that is the one that, we are not doing so good. We are not even doing average there. Let me put it that way. Then it comes to availability. Then we move back to quality and then affordability. For 2020, it looks quite better. It's like 61.4. So in general, and looking at the broader perspective, at the macro level, because when I'm talking about macro level, I'm talking about we comparing it with other countries. We are not, that bad, but in 2020 and 2020 data is anything to go by, that means we still need to do more in terms of even mingling this together with the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much. I have a follow-up question. So
allow Edmond to come in. Sorry for being rude, but I just wanted you to really emphasize. Did I hear you say in Africa we rank third in terms of food security?
Yeah, third. But then I also gave the caveat that it's not every African country that is on. Yeah, but we rank third.
All right. Good to know. Thanks. Yeah. Edmond.
So you've thrown at us this index, and which looks like we are doing okay. But if you look at the number of people who are suffering from moderate and severe food insecurity, as the FAO captures it, it seems to be increasing from 2016. So how do we reconcile these two pictures?
Okay, great question. So food security, to be honest, it's really a very broad concept. When Haruna was talking, he was talking about dietary diversity, right? Haruna, am I right?
Yes,
if
you
I'm
are.
wrong, you correct me. So that is another aspect of even trying to understand food security situation. Some talk about food consumption score, right? So you try to find out what people are actually consuming. Are they consuming some carbohydrates, some, some fats, some protein and things like that. So depending on how you are measuring it or whichever way you're looking at it, the country is probably going to do well at some, and then it's going to not do well at, at others. For instance, we have another score that they call Reduced Coping Strategy Index. So what that means is, the number of times a household or an individual employed some coping strategies to deal with situations when they did not have food or money to buy food. So the higher the score, the terrible you are, right? So you might not, if somebody, let's say if I borrow from you, I come to you and I borrow food and consume, and you come to me and you ask about food consumption, you will be capturing that I'm actually enjoying, like I'm actually eating some food, right? Consuming maybe the right food, but you are not capturing the fact that I actually borrowed the food from Edmond. So you see the angle I'm coming from. So it is really, really big when you are looking at food security. So it is not even advisable to compare index, to compare like those specific index like food consumption and food, yes, but they only put you, give you perspective about what is happening. So index like this, the Global Food Security Index, it tried to, capture the pillars, the four main pillars of food security. You talk about access, affordability, availability, people having access to nutritious and safe food and things like that. Yeah, this is the one that actually at least try to put a lot of indicators together to tell or give us a picture. But if you are looking at the numbers, the indexes in isolations like food consumption score, reduced coping strategy index, dietary diversity score, then you have to pay attention to those specific ones in the context in which you are talking about them.
Thank you very much. So actually you both jumped step, because now I want to ask you, now we know we are not doing bad, but still there is a gap up there to improve.
Yeah. We need to do, and no, I shouldn't even say not bad, but man, there is still more work.
There is still more work to do.
Yeah, there's still, especially in the midst of the pandemic. Yeah.
My next question is, so is the Planting for Food and Jobs a policy that was crafted to fill this gap? But before you answer that question, you would have to help us refresh our memory what this policy is all about. I'll direct this question to Gado. So what is this policy all about?
All right, thank you. So for the Planting for Food and Jobs, and hereafter I will refer to it shortly as the PFJ. So the PFJ is a flagship agriculture program that the government of Ghana, under His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, launched in 2017. That's at GOS, so April 19th. Basically, it includes 5 modules, and Evans in the introduction mentioned the first module as the Planting for Food and Jobs, the crops aspect, aim to promote food security and immediate availability of selected crops on the market, and also to provide jobs. There are other modules like the Planting for Export and Rural Development, Greenhouse Technology Villages, Rearing for Food and Jobs, and Agriculture Mechanization Services. But of course, the political environment only took on the Planting for Food and Jobs, the PFJ. So the tenets of the program include: 1, motivating farmers to adopt certified seed and fertilizers. These have been tried severally with different programs. And before I even proceed, I must state that in terms of the political capital and in terms of the commitment, I can be challenged, but I want to state that apart from the Operation Feed Yourself, this is the next program that saw that commitment from government. So it was very ambitious. It empowered the beneficiaries with knowledge and skills to maximize their benefit, also improving the market availability of increased food produce under the campaign. Then we look at what were the motivating tools under this program. So the program was crafted. In my earlier submission, I mentioned that the fertilizer subsidy policy was enrolled into the program in 2018 to give the broad base. So 50% subsidy of the cost of input, the seed and fertilizers, were taken into the program. Then complementary service such as the extension service and marketing output also was enrolled. So Evans and Edmond and my co-panelists here, when we look at broadly this Planting for Food and Jobs, let me just give me 1 minute for me to look at it locally and the regional level. Ghana is within Africa, and we have committed ourselves into a development plan in Africa in Malabo that we call the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, which was signed in 2009 under the African Union's new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD. So they assured, under the declaration, they assure all the countries which signed to this, assured or committed 10% of their annual government expenditure to develop agriculture. And it is therefore very good for the government of Ghana in 2017 to enroll this program. But of course, that was not the first commitment we have done. We started with what we call the Ghana Food and Agriculture Sector Development Policy, FATS 1 and 2, which ran from 2007 to 2015. Then to implement it, we developed a medium-term plan for its implementation, which we call the Medium-Term Agriculture Sector Investment Plan, METASIP. Then we came with the Ghana Shared Growth and Development Agenda. So GOG recently validated a policy matrix for METASIP 1 and METASIP 2. Now the roadmap of METASIP 3, if I say METASIP, that's the Medium-Term Agriculture Sector Investment Plan. The roadmap for the METASIP 3, which we are running from 2018 to 2021, is the planting for food and jobs. So it's just the name that was coined to ideally capture the local, if I say local, the national interest in agriculture, and then the regional in the African region. So basically that's how the planting for food and jobs came.
So if I understood you correctly, because I was also having a problem with the word flagship. You see it everywhere. It's a flagship program. And I was thinking, this is not the very first of such program that we've had. So if I understood you correctly, it's just a continuation of, let's say, a decade-long strategy by the country.
Exactly.
We've just elevated it and given it a different name, maybe for many other reasons that we cannot.
You are very right, because the Malabo Convention or Declaration is targeting at least from 2009 to 2025. So we have this long-term plan around the continent for us as a nation to craft our agriculture policies or program, committing 10% to this. So we started with what I've mentioned, first the METASIP. Now METASIP 3 was just crafted as a planting for food and jobs. And it's just, politicians are politicians.
Mm-hmm.
They look at the political capital and the economic capital. So you will see it as a political tool, but more or less they look at the regional convention as well.
Maybe before perhaps Kwabna comes in or Edmond also follows up with another. I mean, Haruna, thanks, but you just alluded to the fact that it's somehow a change in name, but also in your earlier submission, you sought to praise it or at least tout it as the second best, agricultural food policy after the Operation Feed Yourself by Kutu Champon, then
Yes.
70s when you and I were not there actually. And so on what basis? Yeah, I know you sought to justify, but if it's just a change of name and it's something we are continuing, on what basis again do you seem to say is the second most ambitious food policy we've had?
Thank you, Evans. That's a very clever question. And I jump something that I should have mentioned. I earlier on mentioned that with the regional level, the convention that we signed in Malabo in 2009, we were to commit 10% of that, our investment, budgetary allocation to agriculture. I called it ambitious because of the budgetary allocation to this program. The initial budget estimate, Evans, was 3.3 billion Ghana cedis over the 4 years. They started with a modest amount of 190 million Ghana cedis in 2017, but rising it rapidly to 1.6 billion Ghana cedis in 2020. So clearly, you may disagree with what the challenges that we are having now, which we will come to, and the recommendations. But to be honest and sincere, the commitment with the budgetary allocation to this program has been enormous. And that's why I praise it in my earlier submission.
Very well, thanks.
Very well. Yeah, so I now go to Dr. Kra. Now we've heard about the project, the policy and what it is. One thing that keeps baffling me a bit is, how do we do the targeting for this policy? I mean, how does it work in reality? Because I don't understand. How do I benefit from it? Dr. Kra,
Yeah. Okay, so and I believe Haruna probably can come in when it comes to especially the specific detailed implementation of how it works. But for the crop model, first of all, you have to be a farmer, right? You have to be a farmer to qualify for the input subsidies, for instance, the fertilizer and what is it, the improved seeds that they give to farmers. So the basic qualification is you having to be a farmer. Of course, they don't reach out to they don't give it out to anybody. They reach out to farmers, but it's not every farmer too that qualifies. And that is why I said maybe Haruna can come in there with, like, super detailed specifics about who actually, qualifies. But what I know is smallholder farmers or farmers actually get these subsidies, like fertilizer is subsidized like 50%. You go and you pay half of it, you get it, and then you're given improved seeds and improved it. So Haruna, add those details if you have the specific selection. And I know that because this is still politically motivated, you're basically going to have favoritism there. And that is one of the things that, I will also talk about at the tail end of the program when we're talking about things that are hindering the progress of the program, because it's, politics is involved in there. The right people probably don't get the inputs at the right time, or they don't even get it at all. And that political battle come to play. So I will just defer to Haruna to add that.
Thank you, Dr. Kra. So Edmond, the policy was conceived such that through multiplier effects, the increased availability and accessibility of inputs and services that is being provided, the higher agriculture output and productivity will open new opportunities for people. So that's under all things being equal, ceteris paribus. But we know it's not always that things are equal. These are economists formulating their policy.
All other things.
So the enterprise, so basically when output and productivity increases, the employment opportunities in agriculture and allied sectors through what we call the forward and backward linkages will now show up. So if, for instance, you're asking how do we benefit? Though we are not currently in the country, but if we have our brothers who are just home idle, when there is a farmer who is able to increase his farmland, he can now at least access the services of these our brothers. So the enterprises operate along the supply chains of input and marketing, and the output is basically what creates the jobs and develop the human and technical capacities. So with the farmers they started with a 5-hectare minimum requirement. You must have a 5-hectare farmland. You must register with the district offices of the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, and you should be able to prove that you have that 5-hectare land to access the inputs. And when we come to the recommendations, I will suggest what this contributed to some of the challenges of that policy. So basically, that's how.
My question was in the light of we know Ghana is good at drafting policies, but we also know that these policies mostly remain on paper. So from what you are saying, you mean to say every farmer in Ghana with 5 hectares or 5 acres of land
qualifies, but I cannot guarantee that he will get access to the input, because Dr. Kra has clearly stated that it has a political aspect. And this may be one of the challenges we are facing. I may have the 5 hectares of land, but maybe I'm not closer to power. And as usual,
the next question is like, how many farmers are currently under the Planting for Food and Jobs? Because if you say as a country, we are committing 10% of our expenditure, I mean, this is huge amount of money we are talking about, 1.6 billion. Where is it going? Who is benefiting from it? How many farmers are we supporting with this money?
So great. So now we are down dovetailing into the success of the PFJ program.
Not the success. I was just looking at the targeting, because every program has its target, who we target, and then we could know from the target how many people are now. So
looking at the economic policy document of the government of Ghana, that's the budget, in the 2020 budget, they stated clearly that they've now, with the certified seed, 880,000 farmers as of 2019 benefited from certified seed, amounting to about 24,000 metric tons. That's translating into 600 million Ghana cedis. So this is basically what I can see. But for the fertilizer supply, when we come to the success, we can look at it. So you can see at least 880,000 farmers benefited from it. That's according to the policy document.
I can also chip in here. So I was reading the minister's meet the press statement, like his PowerPoint, like 60 slide presentation, and he was actually giving some numbers, like the number of people, farmers actually benefiting from it. In 2017, it was like 202,000 people. 2018, 677,000. So, there was a huge jump, right? As Haruna indicated, when the program started, it was really a small amount of money that was, that it started with. But then in 2019, it was up to 1.2 million farmers. And then in 2020, the current 2020, that's the current data that I could find, it's 1.4 farmers that are benefiting from it. But the breakdown was what maybe Haruna was given. It didn't really specify who is benefiting from what. Maybe some of them are getting only fertilizers, others are getting fertilizers and the improved seeds, others are maybe getting only the improved seeds. But then in terms of the numbers, that is the breakdown that I got from the minister's press slides presentation, and it was basically online. When I saw it, I was really happy. I'm like, oh, this is good to see this.
Very interesting there. Thanks, guys. And so, yeah, of course, if you see this huge numbers of small farmers benefiting from such a policy, then
and actually it's not small farmers, right? The numbers that Haruna is giving, we only always classify smallholder farmers as people operating on 2 hectares or less, but he's talking about five
it's 5 hectares. They started
and above. So you expect that these are even the heavyweights.
Yeah, that's where the challenge is. And when we get to the recommendations, we can talk about that.
But I mean, still, I think it's a delight to hear that a number of farmers, I mean,
it's benefiting from it. From numbers are really
policy. But so beyond that, and starting with you again, Haruna, because you already even started with wanting to go into the success of this, what would you consider to be a success of this particular PFJ policy?
Okay, thank you. So responding to Edmond, I already alluded to the certified seed supply, which is one pillar of the program. So with that, 24,000 metric tons of improved seeds were supplied to 880,000 farmers as of 2019, valued at 600 million Ghana cedis. The second pillar of PFJ implementation is the fertilizer pillar, which provides subsidized fertilizers to smallholder farmers at a subsidy rate of 50%. So for the first year, you have the liberty of paying 25% upfront, then after harvest, you pay 25%. But from 2018, 2019, 2020, you have to pay the 50% upfront to access it. So in the first year, the beneficiary farmers, that's in 2017, we achieved 176,000 metric tons of fertilizer being given out. Then in 2017 again, when the program was, the fertilizer subsidy policy was enrolled into the program, then we achieved 121,000 metric tons of that. So again, you look at 2018, what are the numbers? And this is where I basically think that something occurred along the line. We are increasing the number of metric tons supply, but again, the suppliers were not able to access capital to maintain their business. Remember, the suppliers are not Father Christmas. Government policy targeting, for instance, in 2018, 331,000 metric tons, 2019, 331 metric tons. Now they are able to supply, but going into 2020, government was not able to pay the amounts they supplied in the previous year. And this amount that government pays is I want to use the word like stable. The principal is what they will pay. They don't look at the interest amounting to the loans that these suppliers took from the banks. So the suppliers were suffering and the beneficiaries were assessing the commodities. That is where we got to a point in 2020. The suppliers said, no, we cannot. This must be done. We must receive our payment before we supply. With the numbers, we have achieved a lot in 2017 and 2018 and 2019. So I will just mention again, in 2019, for instance, we have 331,000 metric tons, and in 2020, 423,000 metric tons. But again, this success can easily be measured with the output. We've supplied fertilizers. What about the outputs? So the yields of our target crops that we look at, for instance, maize. Maize was one of the main target crops that we looked at. As of 2018, we were able to achieve a maize increase, the yield, in terms of the yield, of 89%, from a 1.8 metric tons per hectare to a 3.4 metric tons per hectare. And soybean yield increased amazingly by 200% in 2018. So the successes were mainly 2018 and halfway to 2019. And lastly, if you oblige, the planting for food and jobs. What were the jobs? And the job measurement, I told you the multiplier effect is looking at how the output is used to generate. Then again, there was a dimension of extension services. Let me enumerate this point very well and to praise the Ministry of Food and Agriculture, that for the first time, the ministry recruited 2,700 extension officers, bridging our extension officer to farmer ratio. So now we have achieved a 1:706, one extension officer to 706. Initially, it was 1:1,980 before the recruitment. Then the ultimate target we are looking at, the FAO standard, is 1:500. So for the jobs, I have a very serious issue with how the jobs, Ghana, we don't have any robust system that is measuring unemployment and employment. So for the jobs, going by what is stated in the budget, which I have issues with, I cannot basically put my like a way through that. An estimated total of 794 jobs were created in 2018. The 2019 figures are not out. So this was basically distributing fertilizers and using the multiplier effect to see how much jobs can be created. So far, this is what I can say with a success.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Kraut. What do you also say would be some of the success of this policy?
That's great. Thanks, Ivan. And I think Haruna was still, we were probably reading from the same document or something, because one thing that really struck me was the extension agent to farmer ratio. That I thought was really, really huge. Moving the ratio from 1:1,900 farmers to 1:706 farmers. I was really, really amazed by it. And I was reading it and I was extremely excited. Like, oh, a program like this is able to, reduce this ratio drastically like that, improve this ratio drastically like that. I was really amazed and I'm happy about it. So that is one thing that I'll consider, as to me, as the primary success that I get from it. And then at least because of these, abundance of harvest and things like that we are getting in the market, we have a lot of food. Of course, I still have issues with it, but at least because of that, prices of, between 2017 and 2019, the ag inflation rate, like, year-on-year inflation, where basically we just pick collection of agricultural related stuff like food stuffs, and you're thinking about, how quick those produce actually rises or increases in price. There was a huge improvement. It was 9% in 2017, I think 2017 or 2018, but then it was 19, it dropped to 7%, and it actually contributed to the overall inflation even rate. So that is, one thing. I don't know the 2020 figures, so I cannot speak to that, but at least seeing that, reduction, it made me happy that, well, of course, there is more food, people are producing more, and at least we are probably doing a bit better in terms of making it, accessible to people to purchase. Because when we produce tons and tons of maize and rice and all these things, but then they are left in the hinterland, then people don't have access to it. So you can say, oh, we produce some so and so metric tons of rice, but then if we don't have access to it, or, if you don't have access to it, then prices are still going to be high. But once prices are remaining at least the same or, increasing, but then at a slower pace, you kind of, attribute that to the fact that we are producing more and we are still making it, accessible through maybe the buffer stock and, the warehouse things that actually allow farmers to store their produce a little bit before getting into the market, and also making the road network a bit better for that. So these are the two things, at least keeping the prices of agricultural related, produce at, an extremely lower levels. Of course, it's going up, but not at, a skyrocketing pace, not extremely faster pace. And then two, the reduction of the improvement in agricultural agent to, farmer ratio, extension agent to the farmer ratio. And then the fact that it's also, producing, acting as job creation avenue for the teeming youth, and even making it, a little bit attractive, not more, but a bit attractive to people that, want to go to the young folks that want to go to agri production. So now you can think of, oh, if I have the land and, I maybe try and register, who knows? I might be lucky to get seeds at least. I might be lucky to get some subsidized fertilizers, and so I can start. And at least if you have 10 people and 2 or 3 these of the youth are actually, participating in, that is an achievement, that is an improvement, and an improvement in the lives of many people. So the job creation is one, but my primary is the extension, and then the second one is, keeping the prices, the general prices of agriculture related.
Well said. Maybe before I allow Edmond to come in, thanks to both of you, but just a follow-up question, because both of you talked about job creation and with emphasis also on extension service delivery. Beyond that, did the document also point out any other forms of job that was created, perhaps along the value chain? Or for me also, a concern would be at the farm level. Did they report of any other jobs that were created apart from extension officers that were recruited? Maybe Haruna, you can go first.
Thank you, Evans. Evans, I stated it, perhaps maybe you didn't hear. After stating the achievement with the extension officers, I also stated that though I have issues with this number, in the budget statement, they captured that as of 2018, 794,944 jobs were created. And this calculation was based on the beneficiaries of the input and a multiplier effect in the value chain. So it was just a projection using the amount of input, so the beneficiaries number. So basically that is what we have. And as I said, we don't have a robust system calculating employment and unemployment. So I cannot vouch for this figure.
Okay.
One thing that I also left out, sorry for cutting it short, is also the opportunity that it also offers farmers to, at least some farmers. Of course, these warehouses are not many for a lot more farmers to benefit from, but at least some farmers are benefiting from that. Because of that, they harvest and they don't have to rush into selling them, right, at extremely lower prices. So you can be able to take it to the warehouse for a little while before taking it on the market. And I think that is also another slight success there. Of course, I will be happy to see warehouses all over the country, right? So that every farmer has the ability, even if the farmer did not benefit from fertilizers and the hybrid seeds, at least if I am able to afford fertilizers and produce, I should be able to benefit from, at least storing my produce for a little bit before taking it to the market to at least enjoy better prices.
So my question was with the numbers that you were throwing, that for example, Haruna said soybean yield.
Yeah.
Did you say the production or the yield?
That's the production.
The production, but not the yield, right? Because I'm looking at FAO numbers and it doesn't look like the yield increased that much.
Well, for the production, the yield for maize, it was captured as yield, but the others were mentioned as production. So for the yield of maize, we achieved 89%. That's from 1.8. Yeah, from
that's what the report says, right?
Yes, 1.8 metric tons per hectare in 2016 to 3.4 metric tons per hectare in 2018. And then with soya, we achieved 200%. That is from 1 metric tons per hectare to 3.0 metric tons per hectare.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because these numbers are not captured in FAO data. So yeah, I don't know the validity of this data if you want to comment on it, because for example, you mentioned that maize yield increased. However, we still experience this yearly shortage of maize.
This is in 2018.
This is in 2018.
Yes.
Okay.
This achievement, the budget that I'm referring to, the 2020 budget, captured this for 2018, the achievement. And you even be amazed that the total production of the cereals overall in the country, we achieved 1,505,850 metric tons. And legumes, we achieved 405,630 metric tons. And for legumes, 405,630 metric tons. So these issues, for instance, we have our own policy document mentioning these figures, and then FAO will also come. So in my recommendations, you see that I will suggest we should have a robust system that all of us can trust, such that when the figures are coming, we are not just looking at them as political capital, but we believe them and we trust that, yes, these are values that we can vouch for.
Thank you. So the next question is, like, throwing all these numbers, do you think the policy has translated into the numbers we are looking at, and what are the challenges? Because I mean, for me, I've heard you talk about the successes, but something keeps ringing in my ears, but I want to hear from you. Are there challenges, and what are these challenges?
All right. So to start with, Edmond, I will agree that with the successes, the values may not be so good, but we have done well in 2017, 2018, and halfway 2019. But 2019 ending in 2020, there are huge challenges. And I will start with one. The challenge of the fertilizers smuggling around the catchment areas in the three northern regions, for instance, and the border town of the Western North region became a problem. And the minister even confessed to that. Suppliers give you the fertilizer in Ghana, then you look at the market, the regional market, the border towns, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, and Togo. When you have issues that our fertilizers, we receive 50% subsidy, then we buy them cheaply. Farmers are tempted around the border areas to sell them to other people in these nearby countries to raise more money. So smuggling became issues, and severally we've heard news capturing people at the border towns, trying to smuggle these inputs into other countries. So this was basically one.
Okay, so let me cut you on the one and ask Dr. Kra. So Haruna has mentioned about smuggling of fertilizers. What other challenges did you notice, or have you noticed about the implementation of this program?
Okay, thanks, Edmond. So the primary thing, you see, I also have it here. Smuggling of fertilizers. It's really a big deal to me. And number one, limited production of improved seeds. So and I was, like I said, I read the ministers meet the press statement, and at the end, that was one aside from the smuggling of fertilizers. The minister also made mention of that one, like limited production of seeds, the hybrid seeds that they actually supply to farmers. So it means that we have to really increase capacity in the production of those seeds as well, because if you again allow farmers to just stick with the old seeds and not use the improved seeds, because I'm a farmer, I know I have to go and produce corn. If I don't get the seed on time, I don't get that improved seed. Of course, the one that I have is what I'm going to use. And that is what always results in that reduce, that smaller productivity numbers. We're talking about 1 point something per hectare. And then after the implementation, we're talking about maybe 3 point something per hectare. So all those things are attributed to distance. So the limited resources to the lack of producing more of the improved seeds and supplying that to farmers is also a major challenge. And of course, infrastructure. We want infrastructure. Aside from infrastructure, the financial resources to reach out to more farmers. Even the subsidy, I think I also have a problem with it. Like,
so let's focus on the infrastructure now. Okay. What type of infrastructure do you mean? What do you mean when you say infrastructure?
I'm talking about the warehouses. We want to see more warehouses. It is not everywhere. A lot of farmers are not benefiting from that, and that is still discouraging some farmers from going.
But it was not part of the objectives, as Haruna stated, right? So I had 50% seed, 50% fertilizer, extension. Warehouse wasn't part. There was no mention of post-harvest loss management.
So you see, as Haruna indicated, they actually blowing the very first module, right? They're blowing the crop module, but then they have 5 different even greenhouse technology and all those things are part.
Yeah.
Right. So when I was reading the thing, I started reading the document and I saw, okay, the title is planting for food and jobs. Right. And then in the first module, they also indicate planting for food and job, which is the food crop module. And then they talk about other ones and the acronym. I'm like, okay, so is the acronym PFJ referring to only the crop module? But that wasn't the case. It's actually all the 5 pieces that was in, but because of the political capital that people get from getting those immediate numbers and churning them out, you only resort to talking about that, the very first particular one, the fertilizer, the improved seed supply, because that is where you can actually count, right? That I reached out to 10 farmers, reach out to the fertilizer was given to 200 farmers, right? You can easily count this, and that is what actually moves people when they see those things or they hear those things. But the warehouse and all those things are part of it. They have even greenhouse technology where they used to, support the production of tomatoes and things like that. But they don't really talk much about those ones.
So Haruna, Dr. Craig on the lack of improved seeds and also infrastructure. Do you have any more challenges to add?
Yes, I have two to just finish with that. So initially we were discussing about the target regime, the target group, and I stated they started with 5 hectares. So when you look at these 5 hectares of land, it became a challenge for some people. When we say even smallholder farmers, as Kobna stated earlier, what are the issues? What are we basing the classification that we are even looking at? We shouldn't just pick forward data, the regional level or the worldwide level to classify people. We should look at it locally. We should develop indigenous method of assessing the farmlands of our farmers. So people who were not able to assess this, that's basically if I can't afford 5 hectares of land. And our land tenure system, how it's difficult to get land at some places. So these farmers had challenges with even the target farmlands. But again, the planting for food and jobs didn't even cover the cost of land preparation. So if I'm in my village in Pembi in the Savannah region, basically in the East Gonja district, and I'm able to access my family land of 5 hectares, who will even help me with the cost of land preparation? I cannot survive only on fertilizer and seed. I will need a tractor to plow, and that is an issue. So we should look at maybe helping the very poor in this model to do that. And in the recommendations, I'll also suggest how we can get these poor farmers, because I know data regime is being established by the ministry and they are collecting data on that. Then lastly, I'll talk about the funding model. Edmond and Evans, currently the type of funding model that is being used in economics is what we call the transfer payment. Taxing citizens and using the taxes to give as subsidies to the same citizens to produce. Our tax regime, we know, always the GRA, the Ghana Revenue Authority, they are complaining about not meeting the target. So our tax regime is very poor, and we should look at how we can get a dedicated funding source or a levy that we can use to constantly fund this. I will pray that beyond this year or even beyond the next election year, if there is a change of government, I wish this policy is reviewed strategically to form as our long-term investment in agriculture, and that we will not only see it as a political event, but a political something that economic mode that we have adopted as a nation.
Thank you very much, Haruna Gado Yakubu and Dr. Kobna Kra. It's amazing how time flies, but if you're just joining us at SEPSA Talk today, we are looking at whether the planting for food and jobs has improved food security in Ghana or not. And our guests have been Haruna Gado Yakubu and Dr. Kobna Kra. And of course, I'm hosting it with Mr. Edmond Yeboah. So I'll read some few messages from Facebook. One from KB Bossman says, great topic, guys. One from our own AK Mensa says, this morning I was listening to Joy News and there were complaints from farmers in Northeast Ghana raising concerns about how they have not received and have been shortchanged in the supply of the fertilizers. How do we solve such problems and ensure fair distribution across all spaces and times in the country? I'm sure our guest will do that when we get to the very last part of recommendations on how to deal with it. There's also a question here from AK Mensa. Does the policy have any sections on addressing safety and environmental issues? And I know there's going to be a question soon on Zoom from Nanaya. Nanaya would allow you, we just want to have our guest speak to the last part, one question, then we'll allow you to come in. But Gado, does the policy have any sections on addressing safety and environmental issues?
Not that I've come across. Maybe there may be an environmental impact assessment of the program, but for now I cannot speak to that because I have not read anything on that. And I've researched extensively before this show.
And I must say, Ivan Saruna, you've done really well because when I was trying to put my resources together, it was really difficult. You visiting everywhere you can. So when you say, no, there's the policy there, these are bits and pieces that we pull from places. So yeah. I've not seen the extensive, and that's one thing that I would suggest we do better there. Even if it's there, it means it's not at the place where a lot more people can actually access it. So we should actually make it, public so that, and I would also attribute it to, the political, everything is being linked to politics, right? People try to hide those numbers and use them when they think it works best for them. But when it is not great, it doesn't look great, we try to hide it. But if these things are devoid of politics, we have a very clear structure that doesn't really have to do with, any that is not linked with the political party that is in power or whatever, we will be able to have access to all these things because it will be an independent body that is taking care of all this. All right.
Thank you very much. I'm sure this would be part of your recommendations. But before I allow Edmond and Nania, we have this question, and I will start with you, Dr. Kwabena, because together with Gado also gave how the indices look like, giving us the percentage over 100. You also did a brilliant job by looking at it from a macro perspective, comparing it with other countries. Yeah. And for me, it appears that at least in 2019, we were ranked 59 out of 100 plus countries that you talked about.
Yeah, 113, yeah.
Out of 113 things in countries, and we had moved, or we had done better since 2016 down to 2019, even though in 2020 we are not doing well. And I remember the Minister for Food and Agriculture was awarded for having done well in terms of food security in 2019, specifically by forgotten the organization. So the question is, in what ways do you think, can we attribute the success of food security somewhere 2018, 2019 to the PFG, and on what basis would you say so?
Okay, and that's great, Ivan. So food security, it's like because it's really broad. When we're talking about this, it is always difficult. So we have to try to create your caveat and give reasons why you're using you're saying what you're saying. So in attributing, as an economist, we want to make causal inference, right? I want to say, oh, that thing caused that. And I did, when I was reading, I did come across one paper that was done in Northern region to try to, understand the impact of the program on beneficiary farmers. And they saw some increase, but then the increase were not even statistically significant, though I don't even want to talk about that. But even the identification that they use, talk about using propensity score matching and things like that, I had, slight issues with those, but because they didn't find even any significant, even though they saw increment, I don't want to talk about it. So in terms of saying causally, making causal argument that we moved from 73rd in 76 in 2017 to 59th in 2019. And so I'm attributing that improvement to the planting for food and jobs. I wouldn't, boldly say that, attribute that reduction to it. It could be due to a whole lot of things, of which the planting for food and jobs play some role. But I am able to, comfortably say something in connection to the contribution of planting for food and jobs to the improvement in food security between 2017 and 2019, given the fact that we saw, huge increase in production. right? We saw in production. Prices of food fell a little bit. Like I wouldn't say fell, but then the general rise, I'm talking about inflation, the general rise of agricultural related, prices was kind of not that quick or sharp as opposed to what the numbers that we're seeing in 2017. And this could be attributed to the fact that, we produce more food. And we're able to link, or get some of these the stuff that we produced on the market. And the more we have, abundance food stuff on the market, people can actually purchase it at relatively stable or fairly lower prices. So I'm attributing it, the success that we've chalked to the increase in production, at least corn and the general, the rise, the inflation that wasn't that huge relative to 2017 figures. It was a little bit small, because when we're talking about food security, we're talking about availability, accessibility, you eating what you really want to eat. It's not like I have money or I want to eat. Edmond has corn and that is what I can afford, so I'm going to afford that. No, maybe I prefer to be consuming peanut, groundnut and other things, but just because it wasn't available for me at the time, that we can say you're not food secure because you couldn't get what you wanted, at the time. So once you have access to this, it is available, you have access, you have the means to get it. It's not everybody that can produce it, but I have more money, I should be able to buy the thing from the market. So if it's being produced in Tamale, but it's not in the market on the market in Accra, and I don't have access to it, I can say I'm actually lacking, right, from that perspective. But the planting for food and jobs, that at least helps in that perspective.
All right. Haruna, what would you also say? Would you attribute it to it, or you want to be like the economist who?
Yeah, so I'll agree with the economist on the show that stating categorically that it helps to increase our food security score at a certain particular period. You may just be putting yourself in a tight corner. But of course, inferences can be made from what we have. And to say that between 2017, 2018, and halfway of 2019, looking at the production that we achieved, you can say that it contributed to improve those scores. But of course, there are also other farms. People may be in the country who are basically not even benefiting from the planting for food and jobs, who are also doing well at the production level, and they're also contributing to the food security score. So you can't basically categorically say it was because of the planting for food and jobs. Others are also contributing, as I stated, who may not even be beneficiaries of this program. So it will be a tight instance to just put it that is the planting for food and jobs costing that.
All right, thank you very much.
And that could be a thesis question for somebody to do, my master's or something. Yeah.
Interesting. Because of our time, I will just read one message, allow Nanaya to come in, and I'm sure Edmond will ask the very big question, which is also one of the reasons why we are here, to profess solutions moving forward in order to help a better planting for food and jobs. So KB Bossman has shared a link. Those of you who are watching us from Facebook, you could go to that link. It gives a lot of information about the planting for food and jobs, some of the challenges and things that they are faced. And please don't forget, when you are addressing you are giving us your recommendations. There's a question here from one Joyce Quay. She said she would be interested in post-harvest plans. So interesting topic. I'm interested in post-harvest plans. Maybe I'm sure you might give us some recommendations with regard to that. Edmond, is it okay if I allow Nanyao and then you can take the last
Definitely, question?
All right, Nanyao, if you can hear me.
Hello.
Ask a question. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Doc, good evening and thanks very much for the opportunity. Anytime I join this program, I always learn a lot, and today I've learned a lot. Initially, I wrote a lot of questions down, but it looks like most of them have been answered by our panelist, that's Dr. Yakubu. Fantastic. But the only challenge I have is it looks like most of the data he has or we are given were like from the from international, or we don't have local data, and it's like we can see it's doing well, very well. But personally, I was we are still in. Of course, we are poultry farmers at home in Ghana, but from the data you're quoting, they are doing well with regards to the cereals, especially the the soya bean and the maize. The price has even been increasing steadily over the years, and it looks like we are not doing well. But of course, the data are showing that we are doing well, because if there are a lot of goods in the market, of course, price will drop. But we haven't seen that. If it go to a time, we have been getting some of the things, from different countries, especially with maize, especially for poultry farmers. So I didn't get that dynamics very well. But and also I wish some of these people with the policy, like today that I got to know that it's a kind of a policy that what that was being rolled out a long time ago, and that they've changed the name. I think sometimes our politicians should be fair to us, and sometimes engage people with experts or like the expert to kind of help us understand some of these things. Sometimes, with the greatest respect, they invite people who don't even have knowledge in agric to come and explain food and planting for food and job to people, and we end up just saying that it's a foolish program or not a good program. Sorry for my language. It's a bad program. Sorry, but from the look of things, it is a good program, but the way they come and explain, they don't even have a knowledge, and they even get a piece off. So I think going forward, that's something we should look at. Thanks very much, Dr. Yakubu. Fantastic piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nanayao. I share a lot of thoughts with you, and it was exactly my question. I mean, despite the figures that we are quoting, there is a mismatch on the ground, because the price of maize keeps increasing, the price of eggs keeps increasing, farmers keeps crying, yet we claim numbers are the number of the yield numbers are also increasing. So there might be a problem somewhere, which leads us to our last question.
I know before you come in, but I'm sure they would want to say. I also just want to say that maybe
okay. I would have wished maybe you address it as part of the recommendation, but if you want to address it differently, I give it a chance.
No, I only want to add that maybe we should also be fair that most of the figures they quoted were 2018, 2019. 2020 is not bad, and there's no data available, but it's true.
Yeah, 20, yeah.
I think this is also the reason why we are discussing this. Why is it that something that started well was doing well all of a sudden? And so maybe we might hear the recommendation. I just wanted to say that.
Before the recommendation, let me just chip in this one line and then we come. So Nana Yao is talking about the feed source for poultry and then human consumption. So for now, it is difficult to state or to even know whether there is any delineated data showing the human consumption of maize, soya, vis-a-vis that of the poultry source. Because with poultry, we always assign 75, approaching 80% of the total viable cost to feed. So if we are able as a country to establish the human consumption of maize and soya, then we may see the disparities. What happened? Whether really we achieved this and we didn't channel it to poultry production, or the human consumption of maize and soya increased over the period. So that's what I would say.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kra, we've heard a lot.
Yeah.
What are your recommendations to make planting for food and jobs a flagship policy indeed?
Okay, thanks. And I'm glad that we actually get into this stage, because we will talk, and then if you don't really provide a solution, then it's like you've said nothing. So the first thing that I will talk about is finding ways to reducing that smuggling of fertilizers. And how are we thinking about it? When I am reflecting about this, and this might not be a polished thing or a concrete thing, but it's something that we could think through as well. Having farmer groups, and each farmer group having their leaders, right? So if we are releasing the fertilizers and the seeds from salts, we know that our leader is going for 300 bags of fertilizers, right? And when he comes or he or she comes, we are 300 farmers in that group. 300 is too is small, but maybe 50. Each person is supposed to get two. So if I don't maybe need two, I'll probably allow Haruna to have 3, right? So if you have these small groups, And it's not like it's going to go to somebody's, house for one person to be distributing and we have these farmer groups. The farmers would elect 1 or 2 people to lead them. And so when they are releasing the fertilizers and the seeds from source, we make it public that, hey, we're releasing we got 300 and something farmer groups with their leaders. Each farmer group has 50 members. So we are releasing 500 or 50 bags of fertilizers to this farmer group. And we're giving it to each leader who came has gotten this number of bags that they are taking home. So it's not like somebody's going to hoard them and go and sell those cheap fertilizers to other farmers. That could be something that I think could help, address in some tiny way the smuggling, reduce it a little bit. If you have people these local communities, people really, when they elect their leaders, they really trust them. They believe in what they say. And so if we hear that our leader is going for 50, you cannot come and tell us stories. And we know from the source that it was released. Each leader got this quantity, and each farmer in that group is supposed to get 2 bags to buy. Regardless of how much money that you have, you can only get 2 bags from it. That will be, one way of, at least reducing that. And the second point that I want to make is the release.
Maybe before you come to the second point, I have just a thought about what you said.
Okay.
Because I think this is not the first time we are experiencing fertilizer smuggling in the country. Every single time we implement this policy, this happens, and it baffles me that we've not come up with any viable solution. And we keep repeating this mistake over and over again. Could it be deliberate? Because it just creates loop for people to
because
somehow.
So like I was saying, it is tied to the politics. People want to make their supporters happy. And so because of that, somehow, you see constituency chairman or polling station chairman who is holding the fertilizers, who is actually the key distributor of it. That cannot help because that person is going to share or going to make sure that the people within his or her circle are the people that are benefit from. But should that be the case? Maybe these people are not even farmers. They are not even, having that 5 hectare or whatever that we can talk about. But if we pay attention to these details, we take those special policies like that, and as a country, we have an independent body that is in charge of that. Again, that also raises a question because you need the political commitment. So if it is not my policy, that's something that I think is going to make people feel or believe that we are doing well, why should I channel our resources into that? Because it's not going to benefit me. So if there is a way to actually ensure that it is a national thing, regardless of the political party in power, this is what we are doing. And each year our budget is stating that allocate $1 billion to planting for food and jobs. Out of this 1 billion, we're going to spend 300 million on fertilizers and seeds. We buy these fertilizers and seeds. We know that each region, or based on the numbers, you don't want to even use the regional. We want to use the population. You want to use the numbers from the population, right? So Ashanti region gets this amount, and out of these, we have 300 farmer groups, small farmer groups. I'm just using these numbers in Ashanti region. Each farmer groups gets 50 bags of fertilizers. So when it gets to the farmer group, it's the farmer, those 50 or 10 people that are going to share. It doesn't go to a party.
So you are talking about efficient management and distribution of
the fertilizers. You don't give it to the political parties, the chairman or the constituency, the polling station executive to share. If you do that, it is always going to create problems. They always try to create artificial shortage and then resell to farmers at an exorbitant prices.
Well noted.
Before Haruna comes in, I know it's going to be the same thing. I just want to be fair to EKMS and read one question here. He says that it's the same question, it's the same solution that Dr. Kra was trying to prefer. He says what? How can we ensure effectiveness, timeliness, and fairness in fertilizer distribution? I don't know.
All right. So that will capture one, it will migrate. The first recommendation I have will address that. So initially, I told you that we have a system in place that is helping the fertilizer subsidy policy that was enrolled into the Planting for Food and Jobs. And that is the transfer payment. You tax people, then you depend on those taxes to subsidize input for farmers. Our tax regime is not something that we can depend on always. You can have a budgetary allocation, but you don't know the amount. You can project, but the actuals will not be equivalent to your allocations. So my recommendation for us to have a timely and constant supply of this, my recommendation may seem to be very harsh, but that is the only way out. We must establish a dedicated fund, like how we have for NHIS, having something like ESLA to support our energy, and then NHIS for our health. If we want to commit to the development of agriculture through the provision of inputs, then as a nation, we must have a fund that we must allocate a small portion of the tax constantly to that fund so that we can at least appropriate that to the supply of inputs. Because if you budget, for instance, over 4 years, 3.3 billion, and you're unable to rake those type of taxes from your citizens, then of course it's going to collapse. And the fertilizer suppliers are not Father Christmas, as I earlier on said. They take loans with interest, and as a government, you're not going to pay those interests for them. So you must have a dedicated source of fund to achieve this. Even the major problem with our people is that even with the politics, they are not doing it well. When you know the politics, which is the art and skill, then you must be able to have a sustainable economic policy that will back your politics, the art and skill, so that at any particular time, people will have trust in you. As a politician, if you lose trust with your people, then that's the solution. This policy that is rolled out is a very nice policy, but for now, I can tell you that the peasant farmers are already losing hope in that program. And it's very good that, as at yesterday, the Minister of Food and Agriculture in Parliament stated that at least government has released 44% of what they are owing the fertilizer suppliers so that they can pay 44% of that. So at least we will see what will happen next. So this recommendation basically addressed the question from AK Mensa. My second recommendation is that our farmland preparation and pest control regime must be included into the policy to at least support the poor groups. And how can we identify the poor groups? Currently, we are looking at the 5-hectare basis. Can we review this figure? Yes, we can. How can we do it? Even they should collect data, which they are doing now, as part of the input supply. These beneficiaries must be used, a database must be developed, monitored the growth of farmers over the year, like the years that the program has been implemented, so that we can reclassify people who entered at the entry point. When you came in with 5 lands, were you able to increase your land over the years? What were your inputs over the years? So that we can even win some of the program. So if we are giving you 50% subsidy policy, if we see that there is growth in your output, then we can reduce yours to at least maybe a 35 or 30%. And then now rake in new beneficiaries to continue supplying to them. Then again, the marketing model of the Planting for Food and Jobs and that will incorporate the processing chain is basically not looked at. You have people getting bumper harvests. They just come on the roadside to sell their plantains. And even with the plantain, we don't even know the actual price that it cost. The minister will bring a different figure. The people on the ground will go and buy different figure. We should have, though we have the Ghana Statistical Service, but we should be able to develop a regime that will constantly supply us robust prices of these goods and services. And the processing chain, how we can help so that we rake in the input, the output of this Planting for Food and Jobs, and then look at the way forward. And lastly, I would also urge our politicians that we are not stupid. As a population, we have discerning people. Programs like this, there are people who can read and write. They know what is happening. When they give criticisms, they should not look at it that always people giving criticisms are opposition members. And again, opposition members are not also stupid. They have good people with good intent. Of course, opposition should not always be opposition for distraction. So they should listen to people. Red alarms were blown long ago before we are seeing this. But you will see the ministers, the policymakers, the politicians saying, no, it's a lie, it's this. No, we cannot develop a nation like that. Bring all of them on board, let them talk, give ideas, and let's see the way forward. Evans, before I end, during my discussion, I gave some figures. And of course, as an academic, I would like to acknowledge the source of these figures so that people listening to us can verify independently. So one, I used basically 3 documents. I used the various budget and economic policies of government of Ghana since the program was implemented. So you can check 2018, 2019, 2020. I also came across a review of the Ghana Planting for Food and Jobs program, 2017 to 2020, implementation, impact, and further analysis by Carl Powell in 2021, under the project, the Ghana Strategy Support Program, managed by the International Food Policy Research Institute. And lastly, the Planting for Food and Jobs, Strategic Plan for Implementation, 2017 to 2020, published in October 2017 by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haruna. Dr. Kra, I think we might draw the curtain now, but there is one thing I didn't hear stand out, which is post-harvest losses. I mean, what is the recommendation in that regard? I mean, maybe I didn't hear it well, but it seems like you can do all to provide the input, but if you cannot safeguard the output, which then translates into coming into the market, then we are wasting the time. Because bumper harvest means nothing if you cannot get the bumper harvest from the farm to the market or from farm to fork. Or it's useless if you cannot store this for future use, we produce it and they go to waste. So what would be your recommendation in that regard? I didn't hear much of it from the recommendations given.
Before you come in, Kra, I know you're about to unmute your audio. Maybe just some few messages. I think they are refreshing. One from Naniel says, Dr. Yakubu, well, Dr. Yakubu, very soon you are
Not
really
yet.
very soon. And Dr. Kra too, very phenomenal. And he goes on to say, I pray our people here and heed to your recommendations. Very profound. We all pray so. AK also goes on, his points or their points are well echoed when I saw this morning how watermelon farmers are struggling. And anyway, so great job, guys, coming from the audience here. Please go ahead and Edmond would end the show. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And Edmond, this post-harvest is always, a struggle or a challenge when we're talking about, especially when you are dealing with those perishable goods, like something like tomatoes. Albert is talking about watermelon. For maize, you can talk about, the warehouse concept. They have these hermetic bag, and so they can actually, the warehouse can help store it for at least some time, whilst farmers try to, or whilst we try to find potential buyers for it. But when it comes to the perishable ones, tomatoes, watermelon, and those fruits, that is where, I always get worried about, right? So one thing that I would say would have helped was the concept of the one district, one factory thing, which is basically trying to process, these perishable ones for us, right? So if we have, let's say, tomato processing factory somewhere, and these tomato producers are linked with the processing company, right? All the government needs to do is try to link the farmers to the processor, so that I harvest and I even leave it at the farm, and at the farm gate, and the processor, the tomato processor will come get it. I don't really have to worry about it. But we don't really, do we have those structures in place? So we need to work on, having this value addition. Like for instance, the processing, we have some watermelon drinks and things like that in place. You are producing watermelon, and you know that, hey, there is a huge company that is in dire need of watermelon. So when I'm producing, I'm not worried. I can even go into agreement. Farmers can even directly go into agreement with them, and government can actually facilitate that, right? That I produce, I'm going to give you 1 ton or a tractor full of watermelons every month, at the end of every month. So the month comes, and the processor or the fruit juice company actually go to the farm and grab it. I think when these things are until these things are done, we are always going to struggle. We are always, no matter how well we link farmers to the markets, we're still going to struggle, because ask yourself, what quantity can that small scale farmer carry? What quantity of watermelons can a small scale farmer carry from my village to Kumasi to sell? Right? It is, no matter how well your bed, how well the road is constructed, how connected the farmer cannot carry much.
Very much.
But if you have that processing factories in place, they are linked with the farmers. They go there to get their inputs, at relatively cheaper cost. And I think that is
very much for pointing the next direction.
Yeah,
Mr. Dadu.
Yeah, I'll go in line with him. That's the only
your concluding remarks. Few sentences.
So with my concluding remarks, I would like to urge the government of Ghana to sustain this policy. It should not be an event, just a political event, but it should be a sustainable agriculture policy that we can look at. The Operation Feed Yourself, though some of us didn't meet it, but we read economic policy documents and we saw the achievement, and people are still praising Ignatius Kutu Achampon, though he's a military ruler. So this should be at least one of the achievements of His Excellency President Akufo-Addo, and he should at least try to sustain it. And the next government should also develop on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Kra, few sentences.
Well, I would say thanks for the opportunity, and it was great discussing these things here. Haruna has actually given a very fantastic conclusion remark, and I would say that I will add to that by saying this is an amazing program, and it should be devoid of politics. There should be a clear structure for it. We should commit that in the budgets that every year, if you're going to commit $1 billion into the program, it should be there clearly, stated, and maybe per what the models tell us, if we can increase the amount slightly to cater for inflation and things like that moving forward, so that it wouldn't be like it has to be the political will of whatever party is in power that is going to drive it. But if we have it as a clear program for the country, we don't care about you being NDC president or being NPP president. We're going to have the program running.
Thank you very much.
The program should be devoid of politics.
It was a great time having you on the show, and thank you very much, our viewers. It was a great time having you on the show as well. I have learned a lot, and I believe you have also. Now we've learned that as a nation, it's very important to be food secure because it connects to many other facets of our economy. And therefore, we need to build policies that will sustainably make sure we can provide food for the people. Before I add my last words, I'm reminded to read last comment here. Evans.
All right, thank you very much. So I think there's a brilliant one from Joyce Quay. She even wanted me to alert our panelists to add to it, but I would say this is her own view, her own form of recommendation, which I think Kra already spoke to it when you asked about the post-harvest losses. So she says that we should create a chain from harvest to preserve to storage. Thank you.
So we've heard it. We need to create a chain, which means the planting for food and job is just one block in the blockchain. Therefore, there are a lot of blocks ahead of us, but we need to solidify the gains and kind of build the foundation well so that we can build on top of it the other blocks. Therefore, this recommendation is going to the government that this policy has to be sustained. We need to seal all the potholes with respect to the effective and efficient management of the resources in this. And we must make it devoid of politics. If we feed the nation, it goes a long way to create a booming economy and also a peaceful nation for everybody. Here we end our show. We say thank you very much for listening to us. Please make sure you go to our YouTube channel and watch earlier shows that we've had. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can also join us, CEPSA Africa, on Facebook. Until we meet here again next week, we say goodbye and have a good evening.